prepared for something new. Everyone is different. So are you. Stay straight. No masquerades. Do things that you'll remember. You can push too far, but stay fair. Stay on track. Give it your all. Get to the bottom of things. Decide what's right. Don't believe in what the others do. Find it out for yourself. Be close to it all. Bring your heart along. Follow your goals. Reach for the stars. Turn the weekend into the loudest party of your life. Are you prepared?
Hi everyone, a very good morning to you. Welcome to Circuit Park Zandvoort for qualifying for race 12 in DTM. It's a much nicer day than yesterday. The wind has dropped, the sun is shining, there's some harmless high cloud, but it's not giving us any problems at all. However, there are problems for Paul di Resta. A problem in free practice means that, as you can see, the car is being worked on by the engineers, and it's pretty doubtful. In fact, it's very unlikely that he'll be taking part in qualifying, because a problem with the engine means that the Paul di Resta car is being worked on as we speak. That means that, of course, he potentially will be starting the race from very last on the grid. Rennie Rast in car number 33 then. So we have this qualifying session, 20 minutes of very fast, short, sharp action to come as the drivers will set the grid for race number 2 to come this afternoon. In free practice this morning earlier, well, it was Loic Duval who was quick. Augusto FARFUS was quick. So too was Mauro Engel, as we see Dr. Wolfgang Ulrich momentarily there taking a look. Former head of Audi Motorsport. That position now held, of course, by Dieter Gas. Alongside me is motorsport journalist Lee O'Gorman. Lee, how will Paul di Resta be feeling? Because it's out of his hands now.
Not good, not good. They would have already probably banked some strategy, so they would have, as we've seen many times this year, if you're in a difficult position on track, you start thinking about maybe pitting on the opening lap and getting your mandatory tyre stop out of the way. It'll be interesting to see whether he actually starts from the back of the grid or whether he'll have to start from pit lane, though. Okay, well, that will become clear. Loic Duval, as I mentioned in free practice, was the quickest this morning. Loic Duval, publicly, Dieter Gas has said that Loic Duval, of course, who has been a multi-champion and winner in everything that he has ever done until DTM, Dieter Gas has said that Loic Duval has actually been trying too hard, and that's why the results have not come. Well, they certainly came in free practice 3. He topped the times, as you can see, ahead of Augusto FARFUS and Mauro Engel. So we will see what Loic Duval can do in this qualifying session. As the rest there, don't read too much into the free practice times. Everything that's going to count will come in the next 20 minutes, which is the qualifying session. Edoardo MORTARA, of course, in the Mercedes-Benz car, former Audi driver. And there we can see Loic Duval then focus in the eyes that you can tell before the start of qualifying for race number 2. The race yesterday, well, the qualifying session yesterday, it was advantage BMW because I don't think we will have the weather throw the curveball into qualifying that we had yesterday today, will we? Absolutely. That was rows 1 and 2 for BMW, as the actual rainfall came right in the break between the first and the second runs during yesterday's qualifying session. So effectively meant when everyone pitted to change tyres and have a discussion with their engineer during quali run, then the clouds opened up and effectively rained off the last 10 minutes of qualifying. We're not going to have that today. It's far too clear. What's interesting, Dave, about qualifying session at DTM, of course, we get points awarded in this session.
Of course.
And it's 3 points for pole, 2 for second on the grid, and 1 point for third on the grid. And that's critical now because René Rast leads the championship standings by 1 point from Matthias Ekström.
That was seesawed from yesterday, wasn't it? Because it was Matthias Ekström ahead of René Rast by 1 point. Interestingly, as the cars are released from the pit lane, waiting to go out is Robert Wickens then in the number 6 Mercedes-Benz, as you can see there. The first out and the first in the queue in the pit lane was Maro Engel, who was third fastest in free practice. Yesterday we saw him through the gravel trap, unfortunately, which compromised his race, that's for sure. Whether there was contact between himself and Jamie Green, but Maro Engel didn't finish the race the way he wanted to yesterday. So Robert Wickens just joined the pack, then out on track now. Engel is the first of those, and there is Loic Duval, who was fastest in free practice, hasn't yet left the garage.
And because another driver who had a bit of a horror yesterday was then championship leader Matthias Ekström, who went off not once following his pit stop, went off into the gravel at turn 1. But then as he rejoined the circuit, he had another spin.
I know.
Coming into turn 3 and got dirt and muck and gravel and horribleness all over the track and all over his tyres, and it was just a nightmarish drive for the Swedishman.
What must be remembered is that now the tyre changes as Paul di Resta, look, he finds himself on the pit wall and sadly not in that car. He will not be taking part in this qualifying session. What we should mention about the tyre changes that come in the race is that the tyres now that go onto the car during the pit stop are not pre-warmed. Tyre warmers are not in use. And what that basically means is that the drivers go out on what are cold tyres, and I think it's been really, really demonstrable, hasn't it? The difference in pace between a car that has got tyres that are up to operating temperature and brand new tyres that are going on cold.
What we see in the race day, we often calculate how much of a gap you need to make a clean pit stop and get out ahead of the driver in front. And in DTM this weekend, for example, it's been around 28 to 29 seconds for a for a driver to slow down, get into the pit lane, have a tyre change, and then leave the pit lane. But now you actually have to add potentially another 4 or 5 seconds on top of that, because the outlap on the fresh tyres, cold tyres, is so slow.
So slow in comparison.
That you actually lose an additional 4 to 5 seconds before your tyres warm up and you get the grip to go again. So now you're thinking, well, actually, you probably need a 35-second gap, a 34, 35-second gap to make that clean, gap to the driver you're competing with in the leaderboard.
Okay, so Edoardo MORTARA then out in the Mercedes. Here comes Matthias Ekström, as you can see, in the number 5 car, relegated now to P2 in the points, but by 1 point over René Rast. And it was he that had those 2 offs at that point in the track yesterday. And René Rast then is leading the championship. It should be borne in mind that René Rast is very much a rookie. It's his first full season in DTM this year. He's driven the car before, of course, but René Rast doing a fantastic job and is P1 in the championship. There is Paul di Resta, who takes no part in qualifying and therefore is not going to be able to set a time in his car. An engine problem which the team are working on as we speak. So Paul di Resta, the HWA driver, you can see the car there. I mean, that is huge work that's going on from the engineers. Now, it should be borne in mind that whilst he's missing the qualifying session, they've got to get that car ready for the race and try and get it repaired so that it can take part in the race. As Loic Duval lights up the Audi and the back end steps out. Here comes René Rast then around the outside of Loic Duval. Here comes Mike ROCKENFELLER. And let's get this qualifying session underway. It's going to be short, sharp and frantic because we have just under 16 minutes to set the time that will give you your grid position for race number 2. Up now on this roller coaster, Circuit Park Zandvoort. We're on board with Maro Engel, who was 3rd fastest in the free practice session. We give you the instrumentation to the right-hand side of the screen as we stay on board with Maro Engel. This is a fantastic camera shot. It's the splitter cam, the camera that's low down. Maro Engel then down through the gears now. 170 climbing to 190 kilometers per hour in 4th gear. He's got Loic Duval ahead of him. He sets a 42.3 through sector 1 around the outside of Loic Duval. Down into 2nd gear into this tight right-hander. Back on the power once again for Maro Engel. A blip of the throttle before the left-hander. And we stay on board with Maro Engel. This is fascinating to watch. pushing the car as hard as he possibly can. The revs nearly into the red as he reaches over 200 kilometers per hour. Then through the chicane that earlier had a GT4 car on fire. And therefore the grip through that chicane may still be just a little compromised. Throws it into the right-hander. Middle sector was not so good for Maro Engel at 24.761. Around the Arie Luijendijk turn, the final turn as he heads to cross the timing line, and he sets a time of 1:34.805, which gives him P3. It was brilliant to have that fast onboard shot with Maro Engel, Lee.
Absolutely wonderful. You can really see the topography of the circuit here around this kind of carved out circuit. It really is a track that was kind of born out of the land as opposed to a circuit that is just created artificially from flat land as Engel goes off the track. Meanwhile, Rast has gone fastest with a representative time. That's a 1:32.7. We'll see laps probably about 3 or 4 seconds quicker than that by the time this qualifying session finished, as Rast actually going faster again. A purple sector in sector 1, but meanwhile we're watching Jamie Green in number 53 Audi on track at the moment as he goes on his second fast lap, currently 5th with a 1:36.2. He will take entire seconds out of this, but this is really, at this stage, this is really not times that we hope are going to set the grid. The drivers will set these initial runs, get good banker laps in, then go back into the pits, change tyres, have a discussion with their engineers, maybe fix something or change something on the car, and then be sent back out again for the final qualifying stint. And that is really what will decide the race, the grid for race 2 later on today, as Green goes P1 with a 1:27.6. Rast coming across the line as a 1:27.8. That's P2 as Mike Rockenfeller comes across the line as a 1:28.1. That's third for the Audis. It's Audi 1, 2, 3 at the moment, but will it stay like that as we have BMW's Timo GLOCK 12th at the moment. He was pole man yesterday, took 3 points for that, but then took the race win as well. That elevated him to 4th in the championship, just 1 point behind Lucas Auer, currently the 3rd place man, and only 16 behind championship leader René Rast. Timo GLOCK goes P2 at the moment, is 1:27.690, only 17 thousandths of a second shy of Jamie Green. We're also seeing fast sectors from Robert Wickens and Maxime Martin, but Rob Wickens drops a second or so in the middle sector. Augusto FARFUS, fastest overall in the middle sector of this race. He's coming round into the back end of the circuit now, as he exits the final corner and across the start-finish line. What will this do for Farfus? It is P1 for Augusto FARFUS, a 1:27.475. Maxime Martin, 1:27.642, puts him 2nd place at the moment. Now the BMWs go 1st, 2nd and 4th with FARFUS, Martin, GLOCK. They are sandwiching Jamie Green, the 53 Audi, in 3rd place.
Here comes Marco Wittmann then. He's done better than everyone through sector 2, and he goes P2. So it's Augusto FARFUS P1, Marco Wittmann P2. All of a sudden, once again, it's looking like a BMW fest, isn't it? Because Farfus, Wittmann, Martin, the top 3 with GLOCK now P5. Jamie Green is splitting them in his Audi, who is P4. Let's go on board with Lucas Auer, Mercedes-Benz driver, then Lucas Auer. PBs through sector 1 and sector 2. There you can see the split times up there. Lucas Auer then is going to complete his first representative lap that we're going to see from Lucas Auer. He's currently languishing down there, P14 at the moment. Around the Arie Luijendijk turn comes Lucas Auer, then heading to split the timing beam now. The young Austrian star driver in DTM, well, he improves only to P13, Lee. And
it's a tricky situation for Auer because he had a bad qualifying yesterday. He was actually losing time across all the sectors as opposed to maybe just having one particular off. So the Mercedes guys would have worked on it overnight. They would have trying to find where the issue is, where his Mercedes is losing time. But actually, must also remember, yesterday's qualifying was just poor indeed for general for Mercedes. Their highest placed driver was Paul di Resta, who started yesterday's race in 7th place. So the Mercedes mechanics are going to be working on that overall to try and find an improvement somewhere. As the drivers now finish their first stint, they come into the pit lane. As I said, they're going to change their tyres, going to have a brief discussion with their engineers, maybe make a couple of changes. As we see Augusto FARFUS, I think he's going to get weighed.
Yeah, in the end, the 2 tenths we are missing to Augusto's mid sector.
So Timo Glock's engineer just advising Timo where he's missing a couple of tenths in comparison to Augusto FARFUS. What's always, I mean, it's always close across DTM qualifying, and even now at the moment when we've still got the second run still to come, when you look, Augusto FARFUS a 1:27.475, just a couple of tenths ahead of Marco Wittmann. Then you've got 1, 2, 3, 4 drivers all in the 1:27.6s.
Interesting to note, the FARFUS' fastest time so far, he's not actually set purple sectors in any of them, so he's not...
We do the turnaround quite quick. We take the extra fuel, and I would go out straight away when we are ready, because otherwise the risk that somebody puts gravel or whatever maybe is high.
And that's very good advice from the engineer, isn't it? Yesterday, actually, it played into the advantage of BMW because they set their times before the heavens opened and the rain came down. Well, we're not expecting that today, but it's always a gamble to leave it late in the qualifying session, because if a driver does go off, as he suggested, they could bring gravel out onto the track. They could also bring the session to a close, and therefore whatever lap you've banked early on is the lap that you're going to go with. So Augusto FARFUS, then his car being slid backwards into the garage. We already know that Timo Glock is going to be going out. Here comes Nico Müller, who is a 1:28.470. Don't take too much notice of that time. We're expecting that to improve from Nico Müller in the number 51 car. Of course, it was announced just a week or so ago that Nico Müller would be also taking part in rallycross with the EX team, the Matthias Ekstrom rallycross team, and under investigation there is Edoardo MORTARA potentially for blocking, and it's something they take very seriously, isn't it?
Absolutely. Just one note about the engineer's message to Glock a few moments ago about putting some extra fuel on, getting a longer run just in case someone does go off and kick gravel onto the circuit, or maybe just cause a yellow flag. There's penalties to that as well, because you're going out with a slightly heavier car, so you may not be able to reach the absolute peak times that you could possibly achieve. You're also putting an extra lap on your tyres as well, and what we've seen over this weekend so far is the tyres initially have very good pace, but then they actually drop off quite quickly. They lose that initial pace very quickly, but they plateau.
I was going to say, once they do drop off, they stay at that level, don't they?
Yes, but for a qualifying session, if you just put an extra lap or two on them, that's a difference between losing possibly half a second or maybe a second of those tyres. So if you're going to get out and do that kind of longer run, you need to actually get your fastest lap in probably earlier on in your stint, because once you start getting into 3 or 4 fast laps, you've lost the edge of the tyres and you're going to fall off a bit. So it's pros and cons to that strategy, but it actually does make a little bit of sense considering how close to the gravel traps and dust we are at this circuit.
Sparks were flying off the bottom of the Maro Engel car that we could see then as Augusto FARFUS and Loic Duval both parked up in the garages awaiting the release for the second part of qualifying. And Loic Duval was fastest in free practice, but now he's only 15th.
So again, we plan the same, build and push. At the moment, track is ours. Of course, traffic we cannot control.
So Glock being told then, at the moment the track is ours. Traffic we cannot control, slowly build it. Timo Glock is currently 5th fastest, and we've got merely 6 3/4 minutes of this qualifying session left, and we keep our eyes on Timo Glock as he gave it a footfall there, and the back end stepped out. And of course, at this point, yesterday it was
really fine.
rain that affected the qualifying session. That is not going to be the case today. We're fairly confident in being able to predict that. Under investigation also, not only Edoardo MORTARA, but Nico Müller as well for blocking potentially also. So 2 drivers under investigation for blocking as we continue with Timo Glock, who's just warming everything up before heading towards the timing line, and then he will go for a fast lap late.
And again, that's sensible as well, not to push too hard in this outlap, because again it comes down to this aspect of not burning your tyres out too quickly. He won't be as aggressive an outlap this time around, so he'll put in his first fast lap will be reasonably quick, but it won't be a time that will set the screens alight. But it's actually building the tyres and the car up over 2 laps as opposed to just 1 lap, because he does still have to make those tyres last a little bit longer.
Augusto FARFUS is released and he's out for the second stint then. Augusto FARFUS currently fastest, 1:27.475. In fact, the order is FARFUS, Wittmann, Martin, the top 3 drivers, all BMWs. Then it's Jamie Green, the Audi. Then it's Timo Glock, René Rast, and the best of the Mercedes at the moment is Gary Paffett, who is P7. So it's going to be a very, very busy track in just a few moments from now. We've only got 5 or 6 cars out at the moment, but expect that to increase as the minutes tick down. As you can see, the clock at the top left-hand corner of your screen indicate we have merely 5 minutes of the qualifying session remaining, which means it's going to be very, very busy, which means you're going to have traffic. It's down to the engineers to try and pitch your car out into clean air. We're on board with Timo GLOCK then, currently 5th fastest before his second stint. Out goes the number 6 car of Robert Wickens, also the number 2 car of Gary Paffett. Paffett and Wickens P7 and P8 until this second stint. And there they both are, those Mercedes drivers out of the pit lane now. And heading out for their second stint in this qualifying session that sets the grid for race 2 to come this afternoon here at the Circuit Park Zandvoort, this really rather challenging circuit where overtaking is not terribly easy. Some 13 turns across the 4.3 kilometers, 4 of them left-handers, 9 of them are right-handers. And a point that we made earlier on watching the FIA Formula 3 European Championship, by virtue of the fact most of the corners are right-handers, that puts particular load, doesn't it, on the tyres in a certain way.
Yeah, it's particularly the long turn 5 and turn 6 and the long turns 12 and turns 13. They're actually long, quick right-handers, and that's actually putting quite an awful lot of energy through the tyres on the left-hand side, because they're doing a greater number of diameter turns, as it were. So you do need to be careful with your with your left-hand tyres, because if they're going to go, they're the ones that are actually going to go first. On the other hand, the 2 hard braking points of this circuit, turn 1 and then down into chicane round turn 9, are actually going. You're putting more pressure on the right front tyres. Okay. So again, you additionally have to be careful on those two corners so that you don't ruin your right fronts as well. As you see, GLOCK now on a run. He's actually lifted up, because I think he was blocked actually by Mortara.
Look, he's blocked Mortara now.
And Timo, what are you doing?
Well, apologies for the language. You can tell just how upset Timo GLOCK is.
Anyway, box.
Please accept our apologies for Timo GLOCK's anger and his colourful language, but basically he took it into his own hands to really, and
he's still doing it. He's still doing. What is he doing?
Well, he's continuing to hold up Edoardo MORTARA. He just feels that MORTARA really held him, and now Timo GLOCK has taken it into his own hands to try and dish out some penalty here. Now, this is under investigation. This could cause problems for Timo GLOCK.
Sorry, Timo's just given himself a penalty, slam dunk there, and MORTARA will probably get one as well. But that was absolutely ridiculous. You don't start weaving or getting in way of another driver like that. That's just basic track etiquette. And GLOCK may feel aggrieved that he's been blocked by MORTARA, but you just that is play school stuff. That's the kind of things that you learn when you're a kid doing junior formula, and it's for a driver of his experience.
There is Tom Blomqvist. Let's get back to this qualifying session. Tom Blomqvist, who's currently down there P14. Augusto FARFUS is still P1. There's Nico Muller. Bear in mind, Nico Muller, another driver that, whoa, he locked up going into turn 1. Here's Tom Blomqvist then, P14.
As usual now,
128.557. Augusto FARFUS, 127.475. Then Maxime Martin, who's currently P3. He's done a PB through Sector 2, but his Sector 1 was a bit shabby. So at the moment, with just 1 minute and 20 seconds remaining in this qualifying session, again, the BMW Fest, isn't it? P1, P2, P3 for BMWs. We stay with Maxime Martin. Don't expect this to better his previous time of 127.475, and indeed it doesn't. He's some 2/10 quicker than his 2/10 slower than his previous best time. Here's René Rast that we're on board with now. This is critical because René Rast, of course, is leading the championship and wants to do a very good qualifying session to put himself as far up the grid order as he can. He's currently P6, René Rast then, and the 2 sectors thus far, neither green nor purple, so this probably isn't going to be an improvement from René Rast, but this lap that he's on now, maybe. Now, interestingly, Edoardo MORTARA will be reported to the stewards of the meeting for blocking. It will be interesting to see whether they decide to investigate Timo GLOCK for kind of taking the law into his own hands.
I'd be stunned if not, to be honest. Because realistically, you complain over the radio and you get your team to follow it up with the stewards.
Forgive me interrupting, Matt Arrow. Engel is looking very quick now, and car number 16 Glock and car number 48. That incident is going to be reported to the stewards, but Maro Engel has done 2 BBs. Bear in mind, Maro Engel was 3rd fastest during free practice earlier. Maro Engel then is currently P12 as he rounds the final turn and heads to cut the timing beam. What can Maro Engel deliver here for Mercedes-Benz as the checkered flag comes out? Maro Engel only improves to P10. So who else is out on a hot lap? Lucas Auer we go on board with now as the session comes to an end. We've seen the checkered flag come down. Lucas Auer has done a PB through Sector 1. He's currently P13. What can Lucas Auer deliver? It's another PB through Sector 2. Is it going to be enough? He really rattles the car through the chicane. Lucas Auer into the final sector of this lap. Can he do it for Mercedes-Benz? And at the moment, the quickest of the Mercedes-Benz cars is Gary Paffett, P8. It's not looking too promising for Lucas Auer as he actually bends it and doesn't complete the lap.
Yeah, he was, while it may have been personal best, he was actually a few tenths off in both Sector 1 and Sector 2. So he may have crossed, he may have made a minor improvement.
Would not have been enough, would it?
No.
So...
And Farfus pits as well. He's not going to improve. There's it's slower times from Wittmann, so I think this might be...
This is it, isn't it? Farfus, Wittmann, Martin, the top 3. It's another BMW whitewash across the top 3 places. Split by Jamie Green, P4. Then it's another BMW with Timo Glock, who...
For now.
Cross. Yes, for now. Then it's René Rast, P6, Mike Rockenfeller, Gary Paffett, the best of the Mercedes-Benz, before we see Bruno Spengler, Maro Engel, who did improve from P13 to P10. So the Timo Glock car is parked up, and just to remind you that the incident we saw where Timo Glock was deciding to penalise Edoardo Mortara for blocking him himself, that is under investigation. Here, then, is the way it will look. Augusto Farfus, Marco Wittmann, front row. Then it will be Maxime Martin, Jamie Green. Then, potentially, it will be Timo Glock from P5. Then René Rast, Mike Rockenfeller, Gary Paffett, Bruno Spengler, Maro Engel. Then it will be Robert Wickens, Matthias Ekstrom, Lucas Auer, Tom Blomqvist, Loic Duval, Nico Muller, Edoardo Mortara, and, of course, Paul de Resta was not out in qualifying because the HWA team having to work on his car with an engine fault that occurred during free practice earlier today. So there we can see the number 16 car of Timo Glock, who I suspect will be in discussions right now with regards. He was so cross that he felt he'd been blocked by Edoardo Mortara, whose car has not yet returned to the garage. And
that's notable. So it's not actually just Mortara is being investigated for blocking Glock, but the actual follow-up incident is now also being investigated by the stewards. Just note, if you see on top of the Glock's car, there's park firmly, don't touch. And that's why I think Paul de Resta, as I noted before the qualifying, Paul de Resta may start from the pit lane, because now the qualifying's actually finished, they can no longer work on the car. And if they're still working on the car now the quali's finished,
it's going to have to be.
It's to be a pit lane finish.
Well, this is what the incident we were talking about, where Timo Glock felt that he'd been blocked by Edoardo Mortara, and look, he nearly runs him off the track.
But it didn't stop here. It went on for another 5-6 corners. And I mean, he's such an experienced driver. I don't understand.
Oh, that's how cross he is. Whoa, he is up off the pit lane to have a word.
Yeah, and that's the Mercedes, the Petronas guys actually pushing him away. So he did venture down to the Mercedes pit lane to have a word, shall we say.
There's Edo's car then. Edo is still in the car, I think, isn't he? Yes, he is.
I mean, as I know, these are the thing. You can't lose your head. You get on the radio. This is what people really need to understand about these situations, is when you get on the radio, it's also heard by the race director and the stewards. And you may be sending a cheeky message back to your team, but they are in race control. They're also banking that message. So if you say, oh, this guy blocked me, race control are picking that up as well. And that's where you should have left it. You should not have actually gone to the point where he was almost shoving Mortara off the circuit.
Well, to be fair, we're not in the car, are we?
Well, we're not.
No, we're not. But you're absolutely right. And there, Edoardo Mortara is out of the car, and I'm guessing at the moment that he and Timo Glock won't be having a cup of tea together somehow. I think he's on his way across to the pit wall. Oliver Katzenstein on the right-hand side of the picture there, one of the PRs from Mercedes. And Daniel Juncadella, you can see to the right of the picture there, who, of course, is the Mercedes reserve driver. And here comes the grid for race number 12, as it is at the moment. Augusto FARFUS and Marco Wittmann. A brilliant display from BMW gives them P1 and P2. Maxime Martin will go from P3 with Jamie Green. He'll have high hopes from P4 on the grid for Audi. Then we see Timo GLOCK at the moment P5. Rennie Rast is P6. And then to the next row of the grid, which is the fourth row. It's Mike ROCKENFELLER, and then the best of the Mercedes-Benz. It's Gary Paffett that goes from P8 on the grid, before Bruno Spengler and a good qualifying relative from Maro Engel, who goes from P10. Robert Wickens and Matthias Ekstrom. Bear in mind, Matthias Ekstrom, P2 in the points. It's a lowly P12 for him, relatively. Lucas Auer and Tom Blomqvist will go from the seventh row of the grid, and then on the eighth we'll find Loic Duval and Nico Muller. Bringing up the rear, it's going to be the car of Edoardo MORTARA and of course Paul di Resta, which didn't take part in the qualifying session due to that engine fault. So there is Edoardo MORTARA off to be weighed, and Maro Engel to the right hand side of the picture there. And
I think MORTARA he's not just going to get weighed. I think he's going to go straight to the race director and stewards once that's done.
Yeah, walking down, we can see Loic Duval. Now, bear in mind, Loic Duval was fastest in free practice, only ended up P15 in qualifying, which is perhaps a bit of a surprise, to be honest. But there we are, and there is Lucas Auer, who's quite animated on the radio. Look at that, he's really quite, and you don't often see that with Lucas Auer. Lucas Auer is a quiet, unassuming Austrian. Ooh, he's nearly breaking into a smile.
But he's also 13th on the grid after only qualifying, I think, 14th or 15th yesterday. And as I mentioned, they're losing pace everywhere. And the highest running Mercedes is Paffett in P8. So Mercedes are just generally losing something everywhere. So I think it's not completely unexpected that Lucas Auer is quite upset. He's the leading Mercedes in the championship points as well, third overall and 15 points behind Rast. And from 13th on the grid, Rast is starting 6th, Ecky's 12th, but he may also still lose ground tomorrow today to Rast. If they're qualifying down in 13th or 14th place.
Maybe so. So the two car of Mercedes-Benz, Edoardo MORTARA and Lucas Auer. So Maxime Martin then. Super slow-mos, P3 for Maxime Martin. It's BMW. Then it's P2. Marco Wittmann, current champion, of course, two-time DTM champion. He will be going from P2 once again for BMW. And then P1, a stunning display in qualifying that came early on from Augusto FARFUS. At last, could Augusto FARFUS have some success? Is Zandvoort going to be the track to deliver for him this afternoon? Only time will tell. So the top three, FARFUS, Wittmann and Martin. Jamie Green will go from P4. And that's it from qualifying here at Zandvoort. Please make sure you join us for what will be a stunning race. Bye-bye.